There's a question that's coming for you, sooner than you think and almost certainly before you really feel ready for it. Someone is going to lean across the table or join a call and ask you, so what do you charge? How much is it? And if you haven't thought carefully about this before that moment arrives, you're going to do what almost every executive does. You're going to reach for the only pricing model you've ever lived inside. You'll convert your old salary into a day rate, feel vaguely bold about the number, and then quote it to your client. It will feel logical. It's almost certainly wrong too. Not because the number is too low, though it often is, but because it's based on entirely the wrong model. This video is about getting that right before your first client conversation. I've watched hundreds of executives navigate this transition, building Area Group and other consulting networks across Germany, Europe and globally, and the ones who struggle with pricing almost always had one thing in common: they'd never thought about it before the question landed. We'll cover where the model goes wrong, how to think about what to price instead, and how it all connects back to your positioning, your packaging, and your governance, in that order. And for those who don't know me, my name's Arndt Halbach. Over the last 20 years, I've worked with more than 1,000 senior executives, helping them build and scale successful independent consulting practices. I would even say that my knowledge on pricing is particularly strong because at Era, we were mainly working on 100% success fee, and that's tricky to do, but super rewarding when you get it right. But we'll get to that later. So here's something easy to miss because it's so blatantly obvious. You spent your entire career being paid a salary, one number arriving every month set by the structure, right? There were performance reviews, market benchmarks, compensation committees, maybe a bonus on top of that, maybe long-term incentives. But the fundamental model, time in exchange for money, was never something you designed. It was given to you, and you accepted the model and probably got very good operating inside of it. And now you decide to go independent, start your own consulting or interim management business, and the first pricing decision you ever had to make landed in your lap. So you do what any intelligent person does. You work with the model you know. So you take your effective daily rate as an employee, the number that made sense as a measure of your contribution, and you then translate that into consulting day rate. Feels logical, feels grounded. It even feels a bit bold because hopefully you've managed to add a healthy margin on top of that day rate. But here's what that model is actually measuring. It's only measuring your time and not the value you bring. And for a senior advisor doing proper advisory work, those two things are not the same at all. Let me give you a concrete example of what I mean. Look, there was an advisor, a strategy consultant, formerly group strategy director of a major consumer goods business. 20 years career across 4 different companies, I think. He'd seen almost every version of the same 3 or 4 strategic inflection points that companies in that sector gonna go through. And so a founder-led client brought him in to help them think through a major market move. Should they expand internationally, or should they rather go deep in the existing national market? So the senior advisor asked a few questions, looked at some of the numbers, and he drew on 20 years of watching that exact decision play out in very similar businesses. So within 3 hours, he kind of had a recommendation ready with a clear rationale. The kind of answer that would have taken the internal team 4 to 6 weeks to arrive at, if they ever arrived at the same place at all. Now, that advisor, billing by the day, he wouldn't even charge a full day's fee for those 3 hours of his time, right? But the value he delivered? Weeks or even months of senior time. It's easily in the hundreds of thousands. And what he's saying is, Mr. Client, the faster I get this done, the less it will cost. Well, that model is totally backwards, don't you think? So your value is not in your hours, clearly. It's in your judgment. And your judgment took you 20 years or more to build. The fact that you can now deploy it quickly is not a reason to discount it. This is the whole point of this video. So what do you price instead? And how do you have that conversation with a client who's used to thinking in day rates? The answer is to price the outcome of your work, not the time. And here are 3 framings that work in reality. Number 1, the decision, value, or risk removal. What is the one decision this engagement is going to improve or enable? And what is the cost for your client if that decision goes wrong? So you really need to explicitly start by asking the client, what does it cost your business if this goes wrong? So as a CFO advisor, for example, helping your client navigate a complex debt restructuring, you're not charging for 3 months of your time. You should be charging for a fraction of the cost that a bad restructuring would cost. That might be 100 times your fee. So priced as a proportion of the downside, I think, is the idea. 5 to maybe 15% of the identifiable risk value, I think, is a reasonable starting frame. The fee now has a logical anchor that your client can feel, not just a day rate that they can easily push back on. Number 2, execution acceleration pricing. How much sooner does the client get to where they need to be because of your involvement? So you start by asking the client, what is 1 month of delay worth to your business? Ask that yourself, ask the client explicitly. Because for, let's say, a growth stage company, that might be 500,000 of revenue that, that month's delay would cost them. In an operational turnaround project, it might be 200,000 a month in avoidable costs. So the advisor who compresses a 12-month transformation into 7 months, let's say, they didn't just save 5 months, right? They pulled 5 months of value forward for your client. Multiply that monthly value by the number of months you save, then price as a fraction of that number. Your price focused on the impact on the entire organization. It's not focused on the months that you were present with that client. Number 3, value share. Capturing a percentage of what you actually create. I think, to me, that's the strongest alignment mechanism of all, and the one most advisors never use. Instead of charging for time or judgment, you charge a share of the actual value you create. So a cost reduction advisor who identifies, let's say, 3 million in annualized saving, charging on 20% of year 1 savings, they will charge 600,000 euros for that project. And the client still nets 2.4 million, which they wouldn't have had otherwise. Procurement advisor saving the business 5% on the overall annual spend against the fee of only charging maybe 15% of those savings. I think mathematically impossible for the client to really argue against that. So the mechanisms are simple, right? You need to agree a clear baseline up front, define how savings will be measured and over what period, and then you define the share. And I think the conversation becomes, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Client, I'm so confident in this result that I'll only win properly if you win. And that's a fundamentally different fee conversation. It's wonderful. None of this means, by the way, that you're not discussing time. I think clients are used to thinking in days and months, and they'll want to understand what an engagement with you involves and when to expect deliverables from you. But the time should be describing the engagement and not determining the price. So price is the outcome, and you reference time only for project management purposes, please. Here's the thing I want to leave you with on pricing, and it's really the most important point in this entire video. If you're struggling with pricing, if the fee conversation feels uncomfortable, if clients push back too easily, if you find yourself discounting more often than you should, the problem is almost certainly not your pricing. It's actually the work upstream of pricing that hasn't been done properly, specifically positioning and packaging. Look, when your positioning is sharp, when you are genuinely the best person for a specific problem in a specific type of client, the fee conversation is very easy. It's easy. You're not a generalist that they can shop around for. You're the person they need. Now that's specificity, if that's even a word, is what gives you pricing power. Without it, you're always slightly on the back foot, right? Now, packaging is what makes you easy to buy. The classic structure that works well for independent advisors is to have 3 products or services at different levels of commitment. You start with a fixed fee diagnosis or diagnostic product that gets the client through the door, a retainer that delivers the ongoing work, and then a success fee built into that engagement from day one, and please not bolted on at the end, right? Each one of those 3 can be bought separately. Each one kind of earns the next phase, and you're asking for the date before you ask for the marriage, if that makes sense. And that single change makes a significant difference to how often clients will say yes and how quickly they'll say yes to you. So get the positioning right, but very importantly, get the packaging clear. The pricing stops being a conversation that feels awkward and it starts being one you lead. There's one more thing worth saying about pricing, and it connects directly to another aspect of the second curve architecture framework, and that's what I call governance. I'm talking about your pricing floor. That's the absolute minimum you charge for any engagement, and you don't go below that minimum, regardless how much you think you need the client or any other reasons that you're making up. Pricing floor is not being inflexible, but you're doing it because underpricing your work sends a signal, not just to the market, but very importantly, to yourself about the value you're able to deliver. And it will set a precedent for every subsequent conversation with clients. So the executives who discount their early work when they go independent, they always find it super hard to move those clients to a proper fee level later. The ones who hold the floor, and yes, occasionally lose a piece of work they might have liked, they'll find that their pricing reputation builds faster than they expected. How you price is how the market reads your confidence in your own work. So positioning, packaging, and pricing together form what I call market structure. That's an important basic component of the second curve architecture. The foundation that everything else is built on. If you get those three right, then you will stop chasing work. You start attracting it. The complete framework is in the anchor video on this channel. Every component, every layer, how it all connects. Link is in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.